You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. World-renowned deer biologist.
I'm just a deer guy from Tucson. Just a big, massive thing with kickers and points all over.
It was insane.
Too much emphasis put on genetic.
Especially when you're pissed off because you can't get one with a bow.
Social media does so much good.
If we could just live like, the Lakota Indians again. That ship sailed. It's gone. All right, folks. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am at the Western Hunting Expo right now in the Peaks equipment booth. Got the gators and the poles we're surrounded by. Even a new teepee over here coming. Looks like a prototype. Headlamps. People that have been following the show for a while, you know about Peaks because we've been rocking it for a couple of years. Who knew that a trekking pole company would
blossom?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. I was like, I'll run your poles, I guess, and see what happens. And then I'm like, hey, these aren't bad. And here we are.
I bought some poles from my dad. He's 88 years old.
Nice.
Deer hunts with me, elk hunts with me. I bought him poles, and he says, that's for old guys.
I don't
need canes.
That's why they're called sissy sticks.
So. And I told him, no, all the cool kids are using these.
That's right.
And then I actually made him bring them once, and I was walking up the hill of glass, and I looked behind me, and he's carrying them horizontal. He's like not even using them.
Hey.
They're for old guys.
So for those that don't recognize Jim's voice, this is Jim Heffelfinger, world-renowned deer biologist.
No, I wouldn't say that. I hate that. I'm just a deer guy from Tucson.
Arizona game and fish, biologist, and lately your roles have shifted a little bit, haven't they?
About 5 years ago, I was a regional biologist for more than 20 years in Tucson, doing hunt recommendation surveys, coordinating all that. And then the last 5-6 years, transitioned into a wildlife science coordinator position. So it's more than deer. I worked a lot on Mexican wolves and a lot of western mule deer and big game stuff.
So I've got a whole bunch of questions. I love having you on the podcast because there's very few people like you.
I hope that's a good thing.
So, question. We just got back from Arizona. I went down there with my wife, kids, family, my mom and dad.
I didn't know that.
We went on a bunch of hikes and rode the side-by-side around. We got on some big coos deer. Nice mule deer. This is the first year I didn't tag out in 4 years. If you include my Kawadi Monday with a bow, then it's a 4-year streak, not just a 3-year, it's a 4.
If you include that.
So, and I do because, it is a unicorn, and I haven't been able to repeat it, and neither has Ryan. Ryan hasn't even got one with a rifle, so I get to hold that over his head.
You guys should podcast next to a water hole. They sneak up to you then, don't they, that one time?
Yeah. So, we just got back, and it was an interesting year because contrast this year to last year, there's no comparison. The amount of water, moisture, growth, it was insane. Yeah. And last year, as you know, it was
horrible.
Dirt everywhere, just sand and dry, and everything's dead.
Yep.
They were eating cactus.
Yeah, right.
That's all there was. Jumping choyo, that's what was the game in town.
We had a year and a half of really bad drought through that time you were here. It broke at the beginning of our monsoon season, like at beginning of July in 2021, this last year. In Tucson, the month of July was the most rainfall in 1 month ever. Not the most rainfall in any July, the most rainfall in 1 month in history. So we've got this deluge beginning the normal monsoon season. So we had this real wet year, which really relieved a lot of the pressure. We had a lot of green up. It didn't fix the long-term situation because things were so dry out there. But that's why we've got waters filled this year, a lot of grass cover from that summer monsoon rainfall.
I'm telling you, it was last year had a whole new set of challenges. And I learned, I think what I learned in the data I've captured in the areas I explored and was able to hunt, I got my sort of graphs and charts, and it tells me, everything I thought about where they hang out, these deer, was completely flipped upside down and rearranged. And it took time to figure out, during an extreme drought, this is where the deer congregate.
Yep. You've got to adapt and then improvise and just adjust to the conditions.
I had no idea how much the deer will move from one place to another based on water needs,
right,
and food. And you're so used to it out west, just it's always it's less like that because you don't have it's more snow pushes migrations and stuff.
Right.
With desert animals like this, it was funny because it's kind of a migration about water.
Exactly.
And it never
short
really
term or short distance.
When Ryan shot his first big coos, which I still haven't been able to rival that. Someday I want to shoot a bigger coos than him with a bow.
That's not an easy feat.
Right now I'm just on the let's just shoot a coos at all. Like I'm on the board, but I haven't got a giant yet. But where he shot that buck, I remember when we first went there, and we were seeing bucks everywhere,
right.
and a few good, like solid Boone and Crockett 110 inch bucks, and it was really cool to see running everywhere. And we were sitting there on this mountain, and like we would normally out west somewhere in Montana or Wyoming or Idaho, we're sitting there pontificating about the area, thinking we could come back here every year. And every year probably find a monster on this mountain. We have a honey hole. This place is amazing. We've got it figured out. Look at this. You get a couple years drought, we can't find a deer on that mountain to save our lives.
Right. They're not there.
That blew my mind. And I don't know why it did. It didn't hit me. And so then we moved. Last year, we had to find them completely different areas.
Kind of start over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now that we kind of have, now we know where they are based on extreme drought. Well, this year, what happens? Just grass everywhere. Every wash had water like seeping up through the sand. It was like cold and wet, and there were little puddles and creeks, and there was flowing water in some spots that I have never seen water. So the same problem. It's like, okay, we're going to go back to that same couple of those mountains where they used to be when it was wetter. There's still no deer there. What the hell? Answer me that. Riddle me that.
Right. I know it. I can't explain everything, but the distribution of nutrition and then water, if it's all over the place, that's not a big deal. But the focus places of the best nutrition is where they're going to go to, and that's going to be dramatically different depending on the rainfall regimes. That not only the amount of rainfall, but timing. Real intensive in a short period of time is going to make some other forbs blossom up out of the ground, out of the seed bank, or make other browse plants maybe grow longer leaders. And then, whereas the same amount of rainfall over a longer period of time, it might be different. So it's so much complexity out there, and we like to boil it down to some simple patterning, and nature defies that.
My mom and dad were there, and my sisters came, and my kids, my daughters, and they're like, oh, it's also the same. It's just it's all, some appreciated it, but others just are like, this isn't complex. It's just dirt and a little bit of grass.
Dirt
it's
and
like,
rocks.
No, it's really complex. It's a lot more. It's its own ecosystem that we're kind of blind to if you're not used to it.
Oh, yeah.
You take it all for granted.
People spend their whole careers learning more and more and still don't know it all. It's not like a whitetail that goes from this thick bedding area where it gets left alone to the alfalfa field and then over to the pea field and back in there.
Exactly.
It's way different.
It's very complicated. And so we found some big coos deer in some spots where we've always seen them, but they were just they love this spot this year.
Yeah, and you can't always explain why that is, but there's something.
And then we go to traditional haunts, where we've seen some great deer in the past, and there's nothing there. Nothing.
I know it.
I just really so curiously, I wonder if I go back to this mountain that's just crawling with deer this year, will those coos deer be there next year, or will it just be a vacant lot?
They'll be back at the first spot.
I honestly think this particular area, a couple of these areas we hit, that they're probably there in good numbers most of the time.
Yeah.
Where some of the extreme areas where Ryan killed his first buck, or where I was, where there was a lot of water last year, those areas I think are more areas that they hit during like more extreme types of year. But there's going to be some moderate ground, I think, where where they tend to hold up more often than not.
There's got to be some core habitat that has everything they need most of the time, and then in some extreme conditions, they got to use this habitat over here for some reason. There's only water over there,
or whatever.
And then in really wet seasons, there may be a flush of something that's like an ice cream plant, something that's really attractive, and then they're over here. But definitely, when we hang GPS radio collars on deer, and we haven't done much of that with cows whitetail, but when we hang radio collars on, they use a pretty restricted area, but they're just very flexible.
Yeah,
to the conditions and going places.
Yep. Another question I had for you, like, I think I might have texted you, but we've been having this debate. You know, people are like, look, it's not coos, it's cows, and I've taken a stance. I'm going with coos, even though it's incorrect.
That's
completely incorrect, and I am going to continue to fight that.
I can appreciate that. What I don't like is people say, no, it's coos. Like, it's supposed to be coos. If people say, I know it's coos, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong, and I don't care. I'm going to do that till the day I die. That's okay. You've made a choice.
It's something about cows.
I know.
Like moo cows.
I know.
And deer.
We're going to go hunt cows.
It just hurts my heart. I got to call them coos. So
I picture these hunters sitting in the cafe talking really loud about all the cows that they've shot over the years, and these other people listening to all this. I know it's difficult, but that is his name.
So with these deer this year, they were packed in solid. One of the things that I've noticed with large coos deer, coos bucks, tell me what you think of this. We tend to find them in large patches of Ocotillo.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, it seems like coos deer absolutely love being in Ocotillo, especially like the kind of rutting behavior or early morning, evening. Like, we'll see them hanging out in that stuff.
They love to bed in that as long as the sun, the direct sun, isn't an issue because it's not much of a shade plant. But my theory on this Ocotillo plant, which are these thorny sticks that stick up out of the limestone gravel, and my theory is they get behind a couple rows of those sticks, and you can't see them. You've got this gray-white tail behind these gray sticks, and then the shadows from the sticks are on the deer, and they're like invisible, but they can see perfectly. They're just looking through like jail bars, and they can see anything approaching them. They can see everything.
Yeah, it's like they're in some kind of cage.
Yeah, it's like,
but they can get out.
Really good.
They can see out,
visual.
but you can't see in.
Yeah, exactly. It's like some kind of screen. those screens that you can't see in, and they can see out. I think that's what it is. Because they're pretty good security cover.
The other thing I noticed was during rifle, or during archery, which they're, I think, heavily hunted during archery because it's over the counter, and so they've probably experienced
in some areas where there's access. Near roads they are.
I got to think that, you have to be. To get a window into the Ocotillo with an arrow, you got to be within 10 yards.
Right.
It's impossible. Yeah. If they're in the Ocotillo, you really can't loose an arrow until you can't go sneaking it. So last year, our buddy Corey Ford was in there, and I'm like, quit trying to kill him in the Ocotillo. He said, but it's a big buck, and I get so close. I get it.
Yep.
We got close, but if you get close to a buck in Ocotillo, it doesn't really do you much good because
you're going to blow them out of there. And
you can't. You either have to get within 10 yards, and that just doesn't work on a coos deer, or you got to get, you got to wait for them to pop out of the Ocotillo. You just can't hunt them in the Ocotillo. So I think that's another part of it with archery. Now, rifle, you could make it work, but man, with archery tackle, they bed in there, and it's like you think you can make a shot through there. You think you're going to get some 40, 50-yard angle on them, and it's like, no, you're not. I suppose there's some sparser patches, and it's possible, but but they're not really good eating cover. It. That's not why they're there. Is that
right? No, right. The Ocotillos, some food habit studies showed the Ocotillos are like the first thing if you've got drought and you've got rain like we did. In the first 2 weeks, Ocotillo leaves just blast out. And they're like the first thing that's available, these little football-shaped leaves on those Ocotillo sticks, because they're the first thing out there. And deer will hit that, and they'll feed those because there's not much else out there. Everything else takes a little longer to come out of the soil. So that can be an important food item, like for 2 weeks after a rainfall when it's been really dry. And they really leaf out. But the rest of the time, it's not a food issue. They're in there for the security cover.
Well, I did think that it provided security and feed because there's plenty of sunlight peeking through and through the Ocotillo, boom, it's hitting the grasses and stuff. And so,
and it's probably in that Ocotillo is probably keeping cattle out. To come in there if there are cattle in that area. Cattle are getting the easier food around there, and they're not going to walk through this thorny forest. And so there might be more forbs in there, too, for that reason.
Well, for whatever reason, folks, they're in there. Those big coos deer get in there. And you find an Ocotillo, we stop and glass it. Like if you find a big patch, especially if it's on a steep side hill, a ridge.
Upper part of a hill.
It's like they're there. Skylined. You can get them up there. So so this year, the hunting was rough when it came to muleys. I swear there was a bajillion guys blowing up my muley hunt. Like every
Did you try or you just?
We went after a few, and when we found the big boys that we wanted to go after, we just had other hunters they knew we were on the stock. They knew we were moving in, and they just drove up and just started walking toward them too. Like they didn't even there was absolutely zero etiquette at all. And I think just a lot of these people in Arizona, they've been doing this for a long time, and they're just like, if they see it, they don't care if someone else is already on it. They just don't. That's not their ethos. It's like whoever gets there gets there. It's public land. And
best man win. Yeah,
it's weird because other
that.
States, I don't get that as much.
Oh, really?
But I think it's just. I bet the Wasatch is somewhat like that too. It's that style of hunt, where it's just over the counter. Anybody can go and do it. A lot of people go and do it. But we saw some nice deer this year.
That's good.
Really nice.
I was
deer.
worried. The drought was so bad at the time that you were down there, and then after that, even after last year, going into the spring, we just didn't have any rainfall at all. And so before the monsoon started, conditions were so bad. I was concerned. Normally the adults can weather through those droughts, but it was so bad. I was worried that we'd have some adult mortality. And some of those older bucks sometimes are not the fittest. They're stressed out from rutting in the springtime. Nutritionally, they can be really drained. So I was worried. So that's good to hear.
Well, the bucks, I'll say like the coos deer bucks were big. We found some big ones and found quite a few.
And you think about that, they grew those antlers during an extreme drought too. So if you're seeing big bucks, they were hampered by nutrition too, for sure.
They were
didn't look like it,
and they were fat too. Like all the does and bucks, they were fatter than I've seen them. The muleys, same thing. They look good. Now, one of the questions I had for you, we speculated on this last year, and that was antler growth for the deer because we had seen some pretty large, age class type and big antlered deer.
Yep.
The previous seasons, previous years. And then we scoured that state during the drought year in 2021.
21 January 21.
January 21, right? And we talked about it, and I was asking you, look, it just seems weird because we couldn't seem to pick up a buck. It was like every deer had 20 inches plus missing. Right. Like 20, 25 inches of antler growth that just didn't happen on the muleys.
On the mule deer, right.
And we also found it seemed like the coos bucks were more either kind of spindly or the old ones had mass at the base and then they just stopped. They're just clubs, like clubbed-horned bucks without a lot of tine length of growth.
And that's very real. There's a quote from a guy in the year 1346, medieval times.
Really?
And he said, his name was William Thwaite, and he said, the head grows according to pasture, good or otherwise. So this is some medieval dude writing about roe deer and red deer antlers, saying that the head, talking about the antlers, grows according to pasture, good or otherwise. So they were recognizing even back then the nutritional importance to growing big antlers back then.
Well, and we talked about this, and you mentioned your son did a study.
He had access to some info,
in Texas.
And we looked into that, and it was like 20 inches in mule deer.
That's crazy.
20 inches in mule deer. And so, I mean, the size of antlers is based on three things. It's like a tripod. It's age, genetics, and nutrition. You're not going to have a yearling that has gigantic antlers.
Right,
so you got to get them into those peak antler growth periods. Nutrition is huge, as we're talking about, and genetics has something to do with it. Big antlered bucks sire more big antlered offspring, and a lot of times too much emphasis is put on nutrition. People say, well, too much emphasis is put on genetics. they say that we just don't have good genetics for antler growth, and it's almost never that.
Right.
It's nutrition and age. You let them get old enough, you make sure they've got good nutrition, you got not too many deer for the range,
yeah.
and you're going to get them maximizing their antler potential.
So I've never rifle hunted coos. And Arizona has a draw for rifle for coos, which looks really intriguing, especially when you're pissed off because you can't get one with a bow.
Exactly. It's more of a revenge hunt for the archers.
That's right. But I was looking at the hunts there. There's quite a few available, and it looks like they're pretty popular, actually.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yep.
And so, but it looks like there's kind of a hunt for everybody, depending on how many points you have. That looks like the later you get into December, the closer you are to the rut period, the more in demand those such tags are.
More in demand because people know that, and they want to hunt when there's a little more rut or pre-rut activity. But also the number of tags are restricted in those later hunts for that reason. The December whitetail hunt is about a 50% hunt success. 1 out of every 2 hunters gets a buck. And a lot of mature bucks moving around at that time, whereas those earlier hunts are more like 25% hunt success. And so we can't give out as many. We could give out 100 early tags, and it's be this kill the same number of deer as 50 late tags.
Yeah, it's like
so
the
we
difference
manage
between
that.
Archery and bow, or archery and rifle.
Yep.
You can give out 1,000 bow tags, and you'll get the same harvest rate as 50 rifle
So we're
tags.
managing that because we could let more people go hunting by not having those later hunts and having them all earlier.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of demand, a lot of popularity, of course, for those later hunts. So we try to give everybody something.
Yeah. No, it's a cool deal. I'm excited to give it a try. So far, never been on one. I've been thinking about Mexico for a while, but then I'd have to go to Mexico. So
the downside is that you have to go to Mexico.
And I mean, I'm okay with Cancun. I just don't know about all those cartel-ridden ranches.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that hunt very safely, and I don't hunt down there, but I travel in Mexico. But a lot of times I'm going to Mexico City for work stuff, and not so much near the border there. There's some dangerous areas, but there's some people that run operations that are very safe. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yep. Well, I was really happy with the hunt this year, and my kids did a little cactus. We got books on cactuses, and we went out and we looked at tons of them.
Oh, that is really cool for them to see that different environment.
And there were so many different styles that once you start looking at them, and we researched it. The kids were doing homeschool, so they actually are in botany, and they're doing a bunch of homeschool stuff.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It fed right in with school kind of stuff, and so I enjoyed it more than them, but still, they had a good time. We all got a little suntan.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah.
So I recommend, man, it was a great hunt for the family. I didn't draw a javelina tag, and that was disappointing. So I'm going to work on that. But I heard a lot of dudes struggled to fill their javelina tags this year.
Really?
And I think it's simply because the grass was so tall.
Yeah, that could be. Javelina populations don't fluctuate wildly. They're pretty stable from condition to condition.
They were easy to kill last year when it was just dirt.
Yep,
there were so many of them everywhere.
And even because I've flown over 20 years of helicopter surveys for deer and javelina in January, and there's canyons where we'll go in there and we'll survey this big basin with a helicopter, and we'll see a group of javelina here, we'll classify them, see a second group, see a third group in this large canyon basin. And then a couple months later, and it's a canyon I've hunted for years. I didn't go hunting just because we saw them there. There's a canyon I've hunted for years. I go in there, and I'll spend 6 days glassing my eyeballs out, and I can't turn up a javelina.
Yeah.
And I know there's 3 herds that use that.
Yeah.
It's just crazy.
That's what we found.
They're hard.
We stumbled on, what are they, a pack, a
herd?
A herd of 20 of them.
That's
you
pretty
couldn't
good
see
size.
them. You just couldn't see them. They're standing there, and until you were stepping on them, and then they all shot off in different directions. They run funny.
No. With that grass like that, it'd be a real issue.
So, coos deer-wise, I am addicted. I want one with just stupid mass and just a giant. That's all I'm asking.
Just a big, massive thing with kickers and
for.
points all over.
And I want to do it with a bow, but I will feel no shame doing it with a rifle. Either
Right,
I want to do both. So my plan is to continue to collect points every year, because whether I fill my tag or not, I can still apply for the bonus points and stuff. as I do that and I continue to hunt with the bow, hopefully I get it done with the bow, but if I do, I can't hunt anymore for the year.
Right. The bag limit's 1 per year.
1 deer per year, but you can hold multiple tags.
Sure.
Which is really cool with Arizona, which means I can go out there, try to kill that big coos deer in 2023.
And still be in the draw.
And then if I don't get that big buck, then I can do the draw for the same year.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Now, Arizona did pull back on some of the hunt opportunities.
Yep.
Due to harvest rates.
There was a lot of misunderstanding about what happened there. It was kind of a perfect storm. We were on purpose promoting that opportunity. That's what we do. And our agency, through time, in my experience, and all agencies, they seem to get hammered whenever we try to promote some kind of opportunity. We think that there's more opportunity. In all my years of Mearns quail, I was a biologist for southeastern Arizona, and there was about 3 times that we entered what I call the Mearns quail wars, because we'd have a really good Mearns quail year coming up and we'd promote it. Say, this is a unique bird. And then all the resident hunters come unglued because we're just inviting all kinds of non-residents to come. And so that's kind of a standard theme. So that was partially at play this year because we promoted this archery opportunity where you can hunt javelina and deer with your bow. You can shoot jackrabbits if you time it right. You got ducks, things like that. And so
Quaddamundi.
And so that's right. So we did promote that, but there's other things going on. We switched to a system where only every other year will we make changes in those hunts. And so we were in an off year. So it had been 2 years since we made an adjustment, and things were changing in that 2 years, irrespective of our promotion. So we had this drought year, and where we thought maybe bucks were more vulnerable. We had been 2 years since we made any changes. We had some promotion, and we had just a generally increasing popularity of that archery hunt that started even before we started promoting it.
Yeah.
So a whole bunch of things together, but people wanted to simplify that and just said it was all because that we had some people that were well known coming down hunting, and it wasn't all that. It was about 3 or 4 different factors together that caused us to make some changes. Then
it's too often, people want to boil things down to a binary, situation.
And they like to find someone or something to blame rather than acknowledging that it's complex.
Yeah, it's more like a complex, a perfect storm of a lot of things that caused this decision. What's interesting, I get it because I don't want anybody telling anyone about where I hunt and then ruining my hunt spot. I don't like someone going on the forums, and saying, hey, I just killed this giant buck right here in this unit in this spot. It's like, I get that. And as a hunter, I think every hunter understands that.
Yeah.
We, like myself and Ryan Lampers, we've tried pretty hard to not tell people where we're hunting, not what state. We leave sort of, it's the West.
Yep.
It's the mountains. It could be any of these 5 or 6 states. And that's with everything but Arizona. Because
it's pretty unique.
You can't
really hide that.
We can't really hide it. It's the cat's out of the bag.
We're somewhere in the West hunting cow's whitetail in Ocotillo and Cactus in January.
And so it makes it so Arizona's kind of, you can't really do that. But at the same time, when I started going to Arizona, there was a total lack of really appreciation across the board, numbers wise, for people, especially for coos deer. This archery opportunity for coos, but deer in general too was down a little bit at the time.
Yeah,
and when I was there wasn't hardly anybody there.
Right.
And so to me, it was an underutilized resource. And you're friends with Steve Ranella. You've been on the podcast a number of times. His brother had that kind of drama that came out where he's like, I don't think anyone on social media should share their hunts, and I didn't really listen to it or follow it. I got the gist, right?
Yeah.
And then you have his brother over there look at all these opportunities to go out and take your kids to hunt jackrabbits and squirrels and da-da-da-da, and then deer, and here's the coos deer, the cows deer, and lots of educational information and cuisine around it. And
that's another case where it's easy to just blame the influencers and blame social media. Social media does so much good for the hunting community and puts on, and in a lot of cases, a lot of platforms, a really good positive conservation message and an ethics message. And I think it makes a lot of hunters to be better hunters and to model after some of these good platforms. And yours is one of them. And to just say that social media is the bane of hunting, it's
too myopic.
It's too simplistic.
Yeah. I looked at that and I think, as hunters, if we want to preserve hunting, we have to have the population, we have to have the hearts and souls of the population to agree with that.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the population decides.
Yeah, right. We have right now, when they survey the general public about legal ethical hunting, we got 77 to 81% of the public supporting something that only 5% of the public does. And you think about that. I don't know, how do we as 5% have 80% of the public supporting us? We do, because they see us as relevant to conservation. They see us as a positive force for conservation. And there's some social media absolutely that erodes that. That's bad news.
Absolutely.
And hurts that for sure. And we should acknowledge that. That's what Matt is saying. And we should acknowledge there's some of that. But the balance is way more on the positive side.
To say that that's to say that that's just a negative on the whole, and there's no other possible benefit from it. It doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. It's like with Joe Rogan talking about hunting,
Oh yeah.
He brings Jim Shockey on. Jim Shockey just blows my mind with conservation facts and information and knowledge that he brings forward, and he brings forward that idea like, look, the cold hard truth is if people don't value the animal in these places like Africa, in a nation that's more third world, and people are just trying to feed themselves. Mm-hmm. In a place like that, it's a luxury to be engaged in conservation.
It's all defensive. You're trying to protect in little parks and things, and
people are killing for food. They're killing for ivory. For they're poaching for what they can sell in the black market. So when you put a value on the animal monetarily. Mm-hmm. You can preserve populations and the health of an ecosystem in that case.
Mm-hmm. I wrote a book chapter with Shane Mahoney, and it was called Hunting and the Vested Interest of Hunting in Wildlife Conservation. And the whole gist of it was people that have a vested interest in robust populations are going to protect those and conserve them, and they're going to be robust.
Yeah.
If they don't have a vested interest in it, it's just something they see on a nature show, they're not going to protect it.
Yep. So I see what he's done being, these platforms say, and Ranella does a good job too. He's saying, hey, hunting has a place in the modern world. Here's the value it brings. Yep. Here's this, here's that. This is how it's done. And I think that there are a ton of people right now in the world that have completely changed their viewpoint on hunting since they've watched Cameron Hanes and Joe Rogan go out and kill elk and eat elk steak.
The audience that Rogan has, not even the numbers, but the types of people he's reaching is really powerful.
And so people who previously just dismissed hunting out of hand are like defenders of it. And so I think that on the whole, I have faith in human beings. Mm-hmm. On the whole, most hunters want to do it the right way and promote it the right way. And most people can understand what value it brings, as well as they know they all eat meat,
Yep.
And this is a natural way to do it. So I think that it's because you're always in this catch-22 as a hunter where you're like, okay, I'm going to share hunting, I'm going to promote hunting, I'm going to tell people about hunting and how special it is to me, and then you do that, and then you have a bunch of hunters saying, hey, butthole, stop telling people about hunting and how awesome it is. I can hardly get a tag. I used to get a tag every other year. Now I get one every 4. Stop being a butthole. And I'm like, well, Jim, what do you want? Because if you do what they're suggesting, then hunting itself will go away.
Right.
You will lose public support.
5% of the public hunts. Do we need fewer? I don't think so. I think we need a lot more to promote that. And what's really interesting is this locavore and kind of foodie movement that's rising up around wild game. And it's really fascinating. There's tons and tons of people that did not grow up in a hunting household, don't know anything about hunting, but they're really intrigued. And if they can just get that gateway and just a mentor or someone to help them out a little bit, they're all in. They love that. They love going to get their own food and processing it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly an argument to be made that when people share stuff to social media centered around their hunts, that the motivation for the hunt is impure.
Right.
It's not mutually exclusive, Jim.
Uh-huh.
You can be. I hate that crap because you can like to share your hunt and show off something you accomplished and stuff, and it can be for a more shallow reason, perhaps. But then it can also be because you love it, you do it with family, and you want meat. It's not always one thing. Again, back to that.
You can't be a positive force. You can't be a real influencer of good, ethical hunting if you've got 7 followers. I mean, you've got to promote your following in order to get your message out there to a large audience.
And I just look at it as you have to add value to the following. Like the reason that people follow me and do what I do is because
they learn a ton.
I'm trying to give them value, things that they feel are important or valuable to them. And if I can give them that value, they're on board. They're like, thank you. You helped me lose weight. You helped me get in shape. You helped me learn how to do this. I was having this target panic problem. Listen to your show with so-and-so, and it's for years I struggled with XYZ.
That's awesome.
This, you've inspired me to go and start eating organic, whatever it is. And it's like you bring something of value to people, then they reward you for it. And that's the basic premise of any influencer that's trying to do that. You're adding something of value or something that people want to see. And I think you can do it in, no doubt, negative and positive ways. But on the whole, I think people are mostly trying to do pretty good.
Yeah, and the balance is overwhelmingly positive, in my opinion.
Yeah,
of social media influencers and the good stuff they're doing.
I look at Arizona and I'm like, okay, it's a little more crowded than it was when I was there 6 years ago, 5 years ago. At the same time, I feel like I'm not suffering greatly. I have lots of really cool opportunity. Yeah. So that tells me like maybe the spot I was in years ago is too crowded now. That pushed me to another spot that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so it's just like get more creative.
Right.
Find
I was going
ways.
to say, some people aren't as adaptable as they need to be. There's someone in their spot and they're mad. Well, we've killed a lot of deer because we had to go to spot B or spot C and found, wow, there's a lot of deer here. I've never been here before, but it was just my extra spot. And then we've got a new place to hunt. So, yeah, people need to be a little adaptable.
I think the other thing, too, is, I feel for Rennell's brother in the sense that if we could just get rid of all the phones, if we could just live like, the Lakota Indians again, like I'm cool with that. Like there's a certain amount of, we probably as a race, as a species, would probably be a lot happier without all of this modern tech and drugs and everything else.
It would be simpler.
There'd be a little different pace of life, and so,
for sure.
but Jim, the reality is that ship sailed. It's gone.
Yep.
You aren't getting it back.
We're not going
it's
back
over.
there.
The Humpty Dumpty broke. He's done. You ain't putting it back together again. So in the world we actually live in, not the one that you kind of wish still existed, you got to operate. That's where we are.
Yep.
And to me, it's like, okay, well, let's keep expanding and keep promoting.
Be positive.
And it does take an element of unselfishness. There has to be an abundance mindset. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Hey, if you have a scarcity mindset, like you're afraid, like if this guy finds out how to hunt elk, then I won't get an elk. You hoard information. You hoard ideas. You hoard, you don't invite competition, right? And I just think abundance mindset, you approach the world with a totally different worldview where you're like, there's some for you and there's some for me, and I'll find a way to make things work. Maybe I didn't draw that tag, but I'm going to go to this state now. Like you figure things out and get creative.
And it's hard when someone's in your spot. Yeah. It's hard to think about that. And I struggle with that too. And you've got your kids and you bring them in and someone's in that spot you were going to hunt and it's just getting light and you got to find a glassing point. But you got to keep in mind that this is public land. we need a large base of hunters, not only to support conservation, but to protect it when it comes up for a referendum and things.
Yeah. Population-wise for deer in Arizona, what's the word right now? Because you do your counts now. Sometimes you've been criticized because people say you don't have mandatory reporting, therefore you don't really know.
We talked about that in a podcast.
Yep.
That was a good podcast. We delved into that. But our reporting, we get a high enough percentage of harvest reporting that we can make management decisions with them. And if we made a mandatory reporting, the data would be a little better. But there's just so much other things that come from that, and we talked about that.
I agree. And having been an auditor for 12 years in my previous life, and having done statistical analysis, sample sizes of populations to test to see if you actually don't need to know. You don't have to count all $1 million. You just have to take 1/3 of that or 20% of that, count it, and it will reflect the rest of the population. It'll give
if you gather that data in a robust way, not a biased way.
Exactly. So with any level of statistical analysis, if you know what you're doing, you're within like 0.003% in margin of error.
You have a measure of error, and you know how close you are. We do the same thing with helicopter surveys with surveying deer. We don't survey every deer. We survey a fraction of the deer, and from that, we estimate what the buck-to-doe ratio and the fawn-to-doe ratios are in the whole unit. So, in the survey end of it, we sample just a small percentage of the deer population. On the harvest end, it doesn't make any sense to demand that we have 100% sample. We do the same thing. We sample a portion of the hunters, and we can extrapolate that way if you do it correctly.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I've enjoyed it's the hunt. I mean, I dare say, I do all these fun mountain hunts and rugged adventure, and it's like, but I got to tell you, I have a special affinity for the desert and this hunt in general.
It's really cool.
And I don't know what it is, but I think it might be, one of my, it's definitely one of, if not some years, my favorite hunt of the year.
Of that particular year.
And it's the most accessible hunt, ironically, and it's the most challenging with other hunters wrecking it. And yet, I think it's still my favorite hunt of the year. And I've had a lot of people say, I went down there and I didn't see a single deer. Or I went down there and I couldn't even get close. I went down there, it's way harder than I thought. There were hunters everywhere. And I think that's true. I think, sure.
Yeah, I'm sure their experience was true wherever they were at what time.
Yep. But I would say that the Arizona archery hunts are not for the faint of heart, and once you do kind of figure things out a little bit, man, the reward can be great.
There's a learning curve for sure. Yeah, and the more you learn, then the better you do and the funner it is.
And the reason it's justifiable, for the investment, the time, the energy, is because of the waterfowl hunting.
All the other things you can do.
Yeah, we shot a couple coyotes, and they were gorgeous, like red coyotes. Some of the best looking coyotes I've ever seen. Now it was a wet year, so
probably had a lot of rodents and rabbits from the summer rains.
We saw a coyote, big old giant coyote, walking down the road, and we're like, does that thing have a whole coos leg in its mouth, like the whole hind quarter? And it's walking, and it's got this huge thing in its mouth, and we get the spotter on it, and it's just trotting up the road. It comes like 100 yards from Brad. It's just standing there, and so we got a good close look at it. And it was a jackrabbit, a gigantic jackrabbit.
Looked like a hindquarter from a whitetail.
And the two legs were kind of sticking way up here, and he had the middle of its body and, the body part. And the way the legs were standing, it looked like the hindquarter of a coos deer, because those jackrabbits are massive.
Oh, they are 8 to 10 pounds for those antelope jackrabbits.
And
did you shoot the coyote and cook the jackrabbit?
We went after the coyote, but he gave us a slip. So the coyotes we got, it was different coyotes that we got, but it was just a cool hunt, man.
I think that would have been good to just cook the jackrabbit up then.
Yeah, I could have shot a few jackrabbits, and they're ginormous.
And that's a good question. Do you think you saw as many jackrabbits this year? We've had this jackrabbit hemorrhagic virus that killed a lot of cottontails and jackrabbits. That was like a year and a half ago. I think they've come back pretty well, but I don't know. So I'm just curious in what you think you saw, what your impression was.
Last year I saw very few jackrabbits.
Right. Yep.
This year
some of that was drought, and some of it was a disease.
This year I saw a few jackrabbits. If you go back to the previous 3 years, they're not even close still.
Yeah.
But the jackrabbits I did see were giant.
Yeah.
I mean, giant and beautiful.
And they probably weighed a lot more because of the summer rains.
Beautiful jackrabbits.
Yep. They had a lot of food.
What's the one with the black tail?
There's a black-tailed jackrabbit. Yep. And the antelope jackrabbit. Now, the antelope jackrabbit does have black on the back of the tail, so it's kind of a – but the difference is the black-tailed jackrabbit has a black ear tip, and the antelope jackrabbits have this white fringe of fur, which is really pretty, on the edge of the ear. Almost like a white fringe on the ear. And they're bigger. The black-tailed jackrabbits are like 5 to 6 pounds, and the antelope jackrabbits are like 8 to 10. There's a size difference, too.
I think we saw some of both, and I could have shot them. That was at full. I mean, I could have shot them with my bow. Pretty chip shots, 20, 30 yards. But we were in the middle of chasing like a giant mule deer, and so it kept happening where I'm like, should I kill it? We're like 180 yards from the buck and sneaking in, and I'm like, man, you're hoping you could just launch, kill it, throw it in your bag and continue your stalk,
or just carry a little suppressed 22 pistol and pop jackrabbits as you stalk.
Man. So we ended up letting them walk a few times so we wouldn't blow up the mule deer, and then we didn't get a mule deer either. But it was cool. And Ryan has taken his share of jackrabbits and cooked them up, and they just turn out great.
Well, I've got a jackrabbit cookbook.
Oh, yeah. I think you gave me one, did you?
I think so, yeah. One of those first years, yeah.
Yep.
We eat a lot of jackrabbits. They're good meat.
Yep. So, well, Jim, I appreciate you stopping by and hanging out for a while.
Yeah, enjoyed it. I knew I'd probably catch you here somewhere.
I had a few questions there. I had to just bump them off you. You got the years of experience. I didn't run into any cartels or anything.
Yeah, that's good. No smugglers.
No smugglers. Well,
with carpet shoes on.
Well, there was plenty of that. I mean, we saw our share of people getting picked up, but nothing like scary.
Right. Yeah. Yep. I've had big groups carrying drugs and groups just smuggling people, and they don't want to mess with anybody.
Yeah.
They don't want to be seen because they got other things on their mind. They're moving north, and so it's not like they cause trouble unless you just get – there's situations where you get caught at a water hole in close proximity by accident, and then things can get hairy. But
how has the situation at the border been?
I don't know if it's been any different recently. I mean, there's always some illegal traffic coming through, cartels on the other side. There's even some large blocks of land in northern Mexico on the other side of the fence that people have this term called cartel conservation because there's these large blocks of land that nobody will go into because they're cartel controlled.
Right.
And they serve as like a big de facto wildlife refuge.
Right, it's like a
nobody will go in. So some interesting nuance with the whole border issue.
And the wall. So we the couple of the giant bucks we were after, we happened to be hunting near some of the wall here and there, and we saw some giant deer come through walls.
Oh, really? Through there?
Yep, in some of the gaps and stuff, and you're like, and just around it where the wall ends, and you're like, wow, they're definitely crossing into Mexico and back and forth.
Yeah, I've had to call off a stalk when the deer ducked under the barbed wire fence into Mexico before.
Yeah, well, we experienced that a few times. Lots of hunters converging on a giant buck and all these does, and they just went across the wall. And then everybody went home, It was like, okay, well. So I think they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they might. I
think they know. Although in Mexico, there's no rules, so it can be, they're over there. We heard a lot of guys on radios actually saying, oh, I just shot that big deer, because they can rifle hunt. There's no real rules there.
Yeah, it just depends on what's going on that particular ranch on that side. And if it's locked up and nobody can be on there, or if there's cowboys shooting a bunch of camp meat.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So, anyway, folks, you can find Jim on Instagram.
Yep. It's at Jim Deer. And that's Deere, just like John Deere, but Jim.Deere.
And we'll put links in the description field of this video. Anything else you want to share before you go?
I don't think so. Just always enjoy talking to you.
Where's your,
We actually do have this giant 600-page mule deer book that's going to be published at the end of this year. It's mostly a textbook kind of source of all things mule deer, but there's a lot of people that are pretty avid that are going to be interested in that.
Nice.
And it just went to the publisher, so it's not going to be ready anytime soon, but something to keep on your radar.
Cool. All right. Mm-hmm. All right, folks, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you use our code Gritty at Mountain Ops. Check out Peaks Equipment. Get yourself some trekking poles and some gaiters, the new Duo headlamp. That helps us. If you like the show, leave us a comment in the description field on the YouTube videos. And thanks for everything. Stay gritty.